Today we are decorating sugar cookies. First we start out with a batch of royal icing. It can be made using egg whites or with meringue powder. The consistency is key. This is the same icing that's used for constructing and decorating gingerbread houses, but it's not as stiff in the case of decorating cookies. You can see that this batch is still quite firm. It's what they refer to as a soft peak. You can see the peak going down like that. So we're going to decorate using a technique called flooding. And traditionally, a medium consistency royal icing would be used for the outline of the area to be flooded, and a much wetter or more loosely flowing royal icing would be used for the flooding. And that would mean that for every color, 2 piping bags would be required. One with medium and the other with a looser consistency icing. With this method, we only need 1 piping bag per color. So check the consistency of the icing by gently scooping and dropping icing back onto itself. We want the scoop of icing to disappear back into the surface within 10 seconds, or the count of 10. And you can see it's not changing its shape at all. So if it takes longer than that, add water. And if it disappears sooner, add more powdered sugar. So I like to add the water slowly. This is 1 batch of icing. So it has 4 cups of confectioner sugar. And to that we add 6 to 7 tablespoons of water. And right now there are only 5 tablespoons in here. So I'm going to add another full tablespoon, and we will mix that in. You can use a mixer, you can use a stand mixer, hand mixer, or you can mix everything by hand. And now when we lift up and drop icing back in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see that there are still lines of texture along the surface, and we really want it to disappear completely into the surface of the icing. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. Let's call it half a tablespoon. Hopefully it is not too much. I feel like it's easier to just keep adding water gradually than to have to add more powdered sugar again. So we mix this water in. Now we're up to 6.5 tablespoons of water to a recipe that suggests 6 to 7 tablespoons of water. I want to make sure we incorporate it completely. Now let's check. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's pretty much gone back into itself, but I'm going to add a little bit more, not even half a tablespoon. Let's see what happens here. If the icing is too thick, if it's too thick, it will not be very easy to work with a number two size piping tip. And if it's too dry, it can also not flow smoothly. But if it's too moist, if it's too wet or it's too liquidy, the border, you'll see later, the outline might not hold its shape, and that's a critical element. We want to make sure that the outline is able to contain the icing that we're going to flood it with later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's pretty smooth, but I think I might add that last little quarter of a tablespoon. And we'll see what happens here. I have made the mistake of stopping too soon in the past, and I was able to decorate all the cookies. I had already mixed all the colors and loaded all the piping bags, so I didn't want to have to go through the process again. I didn't want to add more water later and go through the process again, so I just worked with it a little more stiff, and I was able to do it, but it just took more oomph. You had to press on the bag a little bit more than usual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that looks pretty good. Once you've got the right consistency, divide the icing into the number of bowls required for the number of colors that you want. I used 1 pound of confectioner sugar, or 4 cups. 1 pound, 4 cups. To decorate this one batch of cookies that we're going to be making. You can see I use these little egg dyeing cups for my colors. Just helps me keep organized somehow. And then I'm using one of those 1/4 cup dough scoops. At least that's what I use this for dough. To make sure that I have equal amounts of icing in each cup. And then over here we're going to do the purple and the white. So at this point we know that these are fairly equal, and I can just add a little bit more to each of these. I think we're going to be using a lot of green for today's Hawaiian themed cookies. So you can see that I have blue, leaf green or forest green, regular green, yellow, orange, red or pink, purple, and white. I like to have separate spoons for each of the colors. That's the white. I wanted to mention that for Christmas, Valentine's, and Easter, I find that I need twice as much white. So I do 6 bowls of other colors and 1 bowl with a half a cup of white. You want to work very quickly so the icing doesn't harden on the top layer. This is the Americolor, and this is Wilton. It has a set of lots of different colors. I've used both. This one is fun because it has a little booklet that comes with it to show you what combinations, how many drops of this and that you need to make different colors. And you want to place everything that you need out on the counter before you get started so that you can work quickly to prevent the icing from drying out. Even if you get a thin crust on the surface, the tiny crumbs of hard icing can clog the piping or leave imperfections in the cookie decorations. Now we're going to fill our piping bags with frosting, with icing. And you can get these icing bags in kind of in bulk. It comes in a box that looks kind of like a Ziploc bag box. This particular one has 100 bags. And believe it or not, I already went through a box in just a couple of years. It seems like just a couple of years. But for every batch that I do, I make about 8 colors. So for every batch of cookies, I use 8. If you do this 10 times, then you've used up a box. I will show you how to put together the piping bag, how to assemble the tip and everything. If you prefer though, you can just fill a piping bag with icing and cut off the tip to the right aperture. That would be too much guesswork for me, so I prefer to use the piping tips with the coupler and all of the bells and whistles. It takes the guesswork out of it for me, and it's kind of more fun to have my own set of tools for something that I enjoy doing. So here's a piping bag. This is a number 2 size tip. You can see it's fairly fine, but I use number 2 size tips for all of them. You need a tip. You need what is called a coupler, and that looks like this. The tip will end up here, and then you secure it in place using that. What the way that I do it usually is I put this part of the coupler inside the bag. And I push it down firmly into the end. Then I take my scissors and I just score around it that way. Pull this off. Put the tip on and secure it with this piece. Okay, so there you have one bag ready to go. I have this handy dandy carrying case or storing case for all of my tips. This is where I put all of my number 2s. So now that we've got all of our bags assembled, I usually try to do this ahead of time so my icing doesn't have to wait and run the risk of hardening in between. But now that we have this, we'll put this inside our glass or mug, whatever you have, tall container, jar. And I like to fold the tip this way so the icing isn't coming out the bottom while I'm trying to fill it. So put that inside your glass. Looks like this. Fold the top end over the glass. You can see that. And then makes it easier to fill these up. And let's start with the white since these were not sitting under a wet paper towel. Twist them together. And now, like I said, I have all the bells and whistles because it's a lot of fun for me to have my own little tools. And I've got these silicone rings to secure the top of the bag. So I'll do that just like this. You can use rubber bands or a twisty tie, or don't use anything at all and you just make sure that you keep this twisted as you're doing your icing. I also have, among my bells and whistles and fun tools, I have these silicone tips to keep the icing from drying. If you don't have that, then take some wet paper towels and I'll show you later, but you can lay all of your icing bags in a row and then fold the wet paper towel over them. Another method of closing off piping bags is, I'm going to take the glass out of the way for a second here. Fold over a corner, fold over the other corner, and fold this direction. In the old days when I was using parchment paper, this is what I would always do. That keeps the icing from flowing out that way. But I would also just do this, fold here then, and I would hold the bag this way and squeeze. So that's another way to do it. If you wanted to do it this way, and you could do it this way and use a binder clip. To secure it. And then before you start frosting, before you start icing, then I would still fold it this way and hold it like that and decorate away. And this is what they look like. And if you don't have the tips, as I was mentioning before, use wet paper towel. And this is if I didn't have these covers. And then just fold them over. And you would keep it like this while you are decorating. You pull out a bag, decorate, bring it back, and you want to keep the tips against something moist all the time. I just found, well, before I got the tips, before I got these covers, this is the method that I used, but while I was icing, in the midst of frosting things, the icing would start seeping out this way. So it was kind of messy, but it works. Do it that way if you need to. So now we're ready to start decorating cookies. I like to put down parchment paper for my workspace and grab a few toothpicks, or if you have a stylus, have it at the ready for decorating and smoothing. Set up drying racks, cookie sheets, or containers for the cookies in the various stages of decorating. And have some designs to refer to, whether you draw them yourself ahead of time or pull them off Pinterest or Etsy for inspiration. Let's begin with a pineapple. first outline the body by touching down at the starting point. Then lift the tip above the cookie, giving gentle pressure to the piping bag. I'm right-handed, so I'm holding the piping bag in my right hand, and I'll guide and stabilize the icing tip with my left hand. Make sure that you touch the starting point to fuse the ends together. And then now it's time to fill in or flood. You can put more pressure on the bag during the flooding process. And just go around and around inside the outline until you reach the center. Don't worry if there are some narrow gaps. They can be fixed later with a toothpick, or you can push them together as you go along. Then give it a little shake to smooth out the surface. You can use the same method of flooding, outlining and flooding with the leaves, or you can just scribble some lines. It's easy to turn the cookie to get the right angle. That makes it easier for you to maneuver. So there's a pineapple, and if you want to add a wet design, you add the flourishes now. So let's try this. This is one of the techniques of a wet design. You just put some lines through. Don't worry too much about that because we'll see in a second. So touch it down in the beginning, draw it across, touch down again at the other end. And this particular wet design, we're going to pull it downward. It's probably good to have a wet paper towel nearby to wipe off the tip each time. That's one style. Another style, you actually go again in the opposite direction. Oops, I missed this one. Give it a little shake again. You can see that little indentation. That'll probably come together while it's drying. Okay, let's try out the Aloha shirt. can really start anywhere, but I like to try to start at a corner. It's easier to hide the starting spot than in the middle of a line. I think you can notice that at every turn, every corner, tight corner like that, I touch down just a little bit to make sure that it stays in place there. So now it's time to flood. Show you how you can use a toothpick to fill in these areas. It's easier to nudge the icing around. We're going to try the flowers on the Aloha shirt. This is what Thanks. I'm going to try the flowers on the Aloha shirt now. I think this is probably how they made them. So we're going to try this. We grab the toothpick again and bring it toward the center. One flower. Shake it out a little bit. See, I think they put some little yellow dots on there. We'll try that too. Okay, so there's the Aloha shirt. We'll come back later. And this is, again, this is the wet decorating technique. But if we're going to outline it, we'll have to do that later after the shirt dries a little bit. Give it a shake.